This is the Philanthropy Show, connecting and inspiring philanthropy.
Welcome to the Philanthropy Show. I'm your host, Luann Saraga-Walters. On today's show, we're talking all things fundraising. What are your biggest challenges? Where should you focus your energy in developing a relationship? These questions and many more with Meryl Stewart, who is CEO of Marketing and Business Solutions, board member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Suncoast Edition? Suncoast Chapter, as well as a variety of many other things that she does in the nonprofit community, helping lots of nonprofits as a consultant with their fundraising needs as well. So welcome.
Thank you.
This is a hot topic. I know this show is going to be one that a lot of people tune into, so I want to kind of really dive into those questions. But first, let's establish who Meryl is. I've given a little bit of a background. Who
Mysterious.
are you, Meryl? As well as being just a fun-loving spirit. You're going to enjoy this show.
I've actually worked in for-profit and nonprofit, and so my background's in marketing and fundraising and communications and public relations. But at a very early part of my career, I really just fell in love with the nonprofit side, and especially the fundraising part. I think working in marketing and for-profit, you kind of develop a little bit of a thick skin, you know, not being able to have a budget, working with people who are telling you no. So working in fundraising and nonprofit seemed like a breeze compared to that in some respects. And so it's really been a fun process to learn about a mission, learn about something great that people are doing to impact others, and being a part of that. So I've taken all of that experience, went out on my own about 3 years ago, and have been working with nonprofits to really help them fulfill their fundraising needs and goals, and teaching them some really simple ways to implement things that seem to be very tough and that don't have to be if they can kind of reformat.
Well, you're coming from an interesting background too, because a lot of people in development in the nonprofit world have always and only been in the nonprofit world. So from your corporate background, what would have been one of those first things that you noticed, either from the plus side or the minus side, that you went, well, here's this amazing difference?
I think the biggest difference is that for people who have been in the nonprofit world that may have never had any experience in the for-profit world, their view on the business model of the organization is much different than someone coming from the for-profit side into nonprofit. It's not necessarily bad because you need a balance of both sides, meaning that in the nonprofit world, you really have to have someone driving the mission, someone driving all of the operations that really support that mission, so that you can have an organization that does great work. But on the business perspective, you have to have someone that's managing the finances, making sure that the operations are in line with actually maintaining a business, as all nonprofits are. So it seems, in my experience, that most people who have come from for-profit into nonprofit have a greater understanding of the business side of running a nonprofit and can easily learn the mission piece. But it's harder to kind of go backwards from someone who's been only in nonprofit to really learn that business element that you kind of get from working in for-profit.
Which is something that we've seen not just in the fundraising aspect, but part of the reason that we do the philanthropy show is because we want to be that educational resource for nonprofits, whereas corporations have a variety of educational opportunities and even some networks, you know, devoted to them. We don't have that in the nonprofit community. With your corporate background, you know, we look at corporations, the for-profit world is about, I've got a widget to sell, or maybe I have a service to sell, and I'm focused on making sure that my operations are covered and making sure that I ask for just enough and cover the cost of taxes and my everything, my salaries and whatnot. We don't really think about that in the nonprofit world. We think of how much can I ask this donor for and what are they capable of supporting. So that's an interesting philosophical difference that I've seen.
It is, and I think what I find with nonprofits and when I'm working with them is to really say, look at it like a business does from the for-profit perspective. What are our overall needs? What are the overall gaps? And how does fundraising or asking for money or finding in-kind donations or volunteers help fill those gaps so that you can function as a business and propel that mission forward? I think one of the greatest challenges for nonprofits is everyone gets really worked up into how do we ask for money, but you really kind of have to take it backwards a second. You can't ask for money unless you know what you need it for. And a lot of times that's harder than asking, is really defining what do we need.
Great point.
So working through that process and looking at needs and resources and kind of figuring out, what can be donated, what do we need financial contributions for, what that mix looks like is the first part of the fundraising process.
So, okay, so let's divide that up a little
Sure.
bit. By taking a look at your entire needs, so what you just said struck something, because we had done another show with someone you're familiar with, Karen Eber-Davis, about different income streams that you have. The in-kind may take care of a portion of your operations.
Right.
As an example, maybe you have needs for a new printer, or you have needs for, I don't know, office equipment, or
Right, office equipment, or maybe you have a capital need. Maybe you have a building that you have that you need money for, and you can have professional service providers come in and do work on that building,
Right.
and they would do it in kind.
then you can remove that from what it is that is your fundraising bucket.
Right, because it's basically you're not expending the money out that you would have been paying someone because they're donating their service. That kind of reduces how much you need in cash in order to cover the bases because someone's providing it in kind. But that needs to be figured into the mix from the fundraising perspective, because if I have opportunities on my list of needs where people can come in and donate services or products that offset cost, then the actual amount of money that I'm focusing raising cash for changes, and potentially the areas within an organization that you need money for changes. So when an organization is defining what they need, looking across the board, operations, finance, HR, all of those pieces that add to the total budget and really seeing where there are still gaps helps drive the fundraising model to really focus on what are the donors going to connect with. It's kind of a balancing act because you have financial needs, but then you have what are donors going to most respond to and connect with. And that piece is based on impact. People want to know, if I give you $1, where is it going to go? Who is it going to help? And so the challenge for fundraisers, one of many, is that you have to figure out how to create that story and how to create that connection and still fulfill the needs. And so part of the process is, dividing that. What are the needs? What are the resources we have to fulfill those needs? So we have some in kind, we have volunteers. What's the rest of the financial pot, and then splitting that up based on impact areas so that you can craft a story to tell so that people can connect with what it is that you need.
I think, what I've seen with different models that we have for fundraising and establishing what is my mission, who are the clients, and what are their stories of success that have helped them. And in telling those stories, sometimes what happens with fundraising is that that's the only story that we tell, and then we get in those restricted dollars
Right.
that are there for that program, and all of a sudden that program gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but there's the rest of this need in your fundraising that's not fulfilled.
Right.
So your organization kind of grows lopsided, and I know that there are a lot of nonprofits who can relate to that because it just gets overblown with that. Trying to ask this question, how can you impact the rest of this need and still tell that story, but generate dollars back to this need?
You have to be specific and non-specific at the same time. So it's that's not really a simple answer.
That's why it's a challenge,
it is a
right?
challenge.
Yeah.
If you're too specific, then yes, you get into the issue of restricted dollars and raising money for a specific thing or segment of the population that, say, your mission helps. Which is what you don't necessarily want to have too much of. But most organizations also have you have a broad mission, right? And then you have different areas that focus on program services. So take like a child welfare organization, for example. They may have 2 or 3 different types of services that they provide within the child welfare arena. But within that, there are different populations that they serve. So you can craft messages that are specific to, let's say, those buckets. But then you also have the overarching mission, which is helping children and families. So there's a way to kind of tell the impact story in your direct mail pieces, in your marketing, that help people connect with the human element of who they're trying to raise money for, without saying it's specifically going to help children be adopted.
And is it okay to ask for unrestricted? To
It
say,
is.
this is what we're doing.
That's the goal.
And in order for us to support this, yes, we need program dollars, but we also
Yes.
need unrestricted so we can pay our bills.
Well, it's a conversation. I mean, with donors, if you have to think of it from a relationship standpoint. You're not asking people for something without an education process happening. It's just like if you're working in the sales environment, you have to educate a new customer or even a current customer on the next thing that the company is trying to do or the next opportunity to help them fulfill what their need is. And so it's the same thing with nonprofits. It's looking at it from the perspective of you have a donor or someone that's interested in helping you, but what are they interested in doing and what are the needs that you have? A lot of times open conversations about we need money to help support staff positions, support expertise, support these things that will help us serve more children or help us serve more, that's the conversation part of development, and the relationship part that really has to be strong and clear so that the donor knows what's happening next.
Well, that gets me to wanting to talk about year-round fundraising versus that annual event. But it's time for a break, so we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, more with Meryl Stewart on The Philanthropy Show.
This show sponsored in part by
My Paper Pusher. Consider it done.
I'm Samantha Abraham with My Paper Pusher. As your organization grows, it's likely that you'll need a financial statement audit. What can you expect from that audit? First, who does an audit? Your board of directors will likely use an RFP process to find an outside, independent CPA firm with experience in nonprofit accounting. A team of one senior auditor plus one or more audit staff will be assigned to handle the audit. What do the auditors do? They get to know your organization before starting the audit by reading and reviewing the organizational documents, as well as discussing your internal procedures with you and your staff. During the audit, they will test your financial statements and transactions to make sure that you are following generally accepted accounting principles, that your internal controls are reasonable, and that the statements reflect the reality of the transactions of the organization. Overall, the auditors are there to help. Next time, we'll learn 2 more things to expect during your financial statement audit. I'm Samantha Abraham with My Paper Pusher, where you can consider it done.
Follow The Philanthropy Show on Facebook for behind-the-scenes action, polls, and commentary.
Welcome back to The Philanthropy Show. We are talking all things fundraising today, and it's a very broad topic, but hopefully it will help answer some questions that you have and guide you into some decision-making processes. We had talked in the past segment with Meryl Stewart about the broad conundrums, I'd say, of fundraising and how challenging it can be and what balance do you walk. Getting into the unrestricted versus the restricted to support the program. But now also, a lot of times development is geared around that one event, that one annual event that's going to bring in, X amount of your, or whatever percentage of your budget needs that you hope for, and missed opportunities throughout the year. So let's talk a little bit about year-round fundraising versus that annual event, and how do we balance those out?
Well, and let me take it a step backwards. So if you think about a relationship with someone from a donor's perspective, and think about even the most successful relationships that you've had or that I've had, those usually don't start and end with only talking to someone one time a year. They are usually a conversation and something that happens throughout the year. Whether or not you see each other every month or quarter, that's not really relevant, but really that you're keeping in touch and that you're constantly checking in on each other to see how things are doing. So from a fundraising standpoint, it's not necessarily right or wrong to have just an annual event where you bring everyone together for some kind of celebration. But the second part of that is how are you going to follow up with those people? So if that's, say, a point of entry for donors to become familiar with what you're doing as a nonprofit in your mission, then what are you going to do afterwards to keep them engaged for 11 months until you have the next one, hoping that they will come and bring more people and raise more money? There has to be an engagement process that
See, what's
happens.
interesting is that you just said point of entry, that you said if it's a point of entry for some people, because I think a lot of nonprofits look at it as the point of sale.
Right.
It's you're coming one time and now you're going to give us some money. And it might be, let's, this table captain model, which we've done for however many years, it's been over a dozen years.
Right.
And I get it and I understand it. But I think that there are some things that need to be updated in it.
Well, and I think the table captain element, it's really based on a relationship model. So what it's based on is that you have someone that's, say, captaining a table at your annual fundraising event, and that they are hopefully your best advocates, the people that are closest to your organization, board members, sponsors, volunteers, any mix of those people. But they're people who love what you do, and they are bringing people that they know who they want to share that love and passion for what they're doing. And so at that time and in place, those people who are the guests that aren't the table captains, that is a point of entry event. It is potentially the first time that they are learning about what you do and who you are as an organization. They have to be treated as such on the back end, which is, okay, now they've come, they need to be thanked, and then they need to be followed up with, because now you have these people, this potentially huge group of people or small, that are ready to hear the next thing. How can I get involved? What can I do next? Asking them for money at that event is just that first step. And if they haven't given, and a lot of times those events will offer people to give thoughts to share or some other way to engage, and that follow-up piece is so important, because that kind of sets you up for what it's going to take.
And that goes into that
them.
year-round aspect of fundraising. I think what we tend to do is, here's the ask, and then somebody gives $10 or $25, and they're never called again.
Right.
And so they don't have the opportunity to become passionate, to become an advocate for your mission.
Right.
But then we're busy trying to do other things through the year, and God bless them. Fundraisers are very busy people. Development people are extremely busy people.
Right.
Trying to handle a lot of aspects, from pledges to, making our volunteers happy and potentially becoming donors and whatnot. But the year-round aspect then, how do you prioritize who you follow up with?
So there has to be a plan. I'm all for plans, but there has to be a plan for how you're going to deal with each segment of your donors. So if you have people who gave, let's say, $10 to $100 at this annual event, or in general to any kind of appeal that you've sent out, and then you have different segments of people working up to whatever your largest gift amount is, there should be people, whether you're a one-man shop or you've got a team of people, a priority list of what mix of gifts the organization needs in order to meet their fundraising goals. Because you can't ignore the people that gave the $10 or the $100 one time at an event and not follow up with them. And you can't not ask the person who has the capacity to give $10,000 or more or $100,000 or more to your organization. So there has to be kind of a mix created of how many gifts do I need at these different levels in order to make up my budget. And what simple things can I do from a communications perspective to keep in touch with certain segments? Because you are probably not going to talk to every donor over the course of the year. There's too many, and there's other places for fundraisers to be. But there has to be a way to engage and connect. And so whether that's sharing a simple story on impact throughout the year with maybe your lower level donors so that they still feel connected, they know where their money's going, they know how it's impacting the mission of the organization. And then you have focused asks on specific segments of people, and that really needs to be based on their capacity to give. I mean, you shouldn't be going after somebody and asking them for money if they don't have the capacity to give that gift. And that's where the relationship part comes in, because you have to know what that donor is, excited about doing, what they really want to give to, and then do they have the money to give, or do they have other thoughts about how they want to do that?
And on the flip side, if they have enough money, when is it okay to ask for more?
Well, and I believe that fundraising is not so scary because it's more of a matching process. And so in my experience, when I've worked with donors, it's really been about, here's my need and here's what you want to accomplish, so how do we work together? Not me necessarily just walking in and asking you for money. I mean, if that worked, I would let you know. But it's more of that matching process where you've worked over some time with people to get to know them.
And there's an exchange of some kind.
There is. I mean, you're exchanging conversation. You understand where they're coming from. And they, a lot of times, will tell you, you know what, I know I gave that gift. Or you may say, we have this additional need. And you guys come together and they say, you know what, we really want to do more. Or you say, we really have a larger number of people we can impact. Would you consider something greater than what you've done in the past? But it's all part of a conversation. You can't talk to someone in January and then not talk to them again until August and walk in and ask them for a $10,000 gift or, whatever that
or
might
I'd
look
say
like.
even a $100 gift, because you haven't had any communication with them.
Right, so that's the relationship part. Like, I think a lot of times we get so caught up in what initiative do we have next? What's the next event? What's the next appeal? But none of that is successful unless we actually have relationships with our donors.
It's about the people connecting to the people within your organization.
It is.
Well, we're going to take another quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about, you mentioned the mix. How do you know what the mix should be? We've got corporate gifts, we've got individual gifts, so we're going to take a look at that. Take a quick break with the Philanthropy Show, and we'll be right back.
And now a word from our studio sponsor.
Hi, I'm Jen Dodd, Education Manager at the Nonprofit Leadership Center, and I have a quick tip for nonprofits about choosing images for social media. When you think you've found the image you want to use for a post, take 1 second to think about the various ways it might be interpreted and whether that reflects well on your brand. For example, when our CEO Emily was returning from an event in Miami, I decided to use Twitter to wish her a safe trip. I wanted to use a travel-themed visual, so I Googled safe trip and clicked on the images tab. This puppy in a plane seemed like a fun choice. But then I asked myself, is this image out of character for our brand? Does it fit with the tone and voice we've established? No problems there. We've been careful to mix in some humor from time to time to keep our brand from feeling stuffy. Then I thought, someone seeing this image will probably assume she's flying. I didn't want anyone to think that Emily had flown down and back in less than 24 hours. We are a nonprofit after all, when she'd actually carpooled with another local nonprofit. So I decided to make it clear that Emily was not flying by including the hashtag glad you're driving. So don't be afraid to inject a little levity into your social media with images. Just be sure you've thought through the possible interpretations.
The Philanthropy Show is on demand every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at both thephilanthropyshow.com and YouTube/WatchMVVP TV.
Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show, talking fundraising today and really kind of exploring, it's a difficult process and we know that there are challenges to it, but it doesn't have to be scary. If it's relationship based, I think that's kind of where we've gotten to. And you'd mentioned talking about this mix of how do you look at what should my mix of incoming gifts be, that corporate versus individual versus how much time I spend with those. So talk to me a little bit about that. How does a nonprofit start to look at what that mix should be?
Well, I think that the nonprofit has to start with what the mix currently is and where they want to go. A lot of times organizations have, they may be heavily grant funded and they're looking to kind of shy away from that because as grants are cut and priorities change, they really need more of a basis that's going to be more consistent. And a lot of times, that's found in more of the corporate and individual giving side of it. I think probably from a health standpoint, it's good to have a little bit of all of it.
Sure.
And some organizations may not really want to apply for grants because maybe it doesn't apply to what they're doing. But the individual and corporate gifts, I think, are important regardless of the grant element. And I think the reason is because you have people and companies that have missions and things that they're trying to accomplish with their employees that are looking to connect with organizations that kind of speak to their hearts. And so finding, the right partners, in a sense, from the organization's perspective is important. I think that individual donors a lot of times have, what's interesting about them is that not only do they have the capacity to give, but they also have a network of people to share that with, to grow from, and to introduce and engage and bring into the mix.
Of like-minded people because their friends, their networks share interests with them.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at a grant funder and you're grant funded, it's not very often the granting organization is going to come to you with 10 more people and say, here's 10 more people that want to give you money. Sometimes that happens. Hasn't ever happened to me, but with individuals, you have that network. It's the same thing with corporations. You have a business or a contact person that's really engaged with what you're doing. Maybe they start by bringing volunteers in, and those people, turn into donors and do other things. And so you have not only a network of individuals then within the company, but then you also have the company's overall objectives and mission.
You saying that too, it makes me think of how sometimes we look at corporations and we see them again as almost like a governmental grant process, which is really the government's grant process is framed out, this is what we're giving to, but there's no opportunity to necessarily develop a relationship with that. It's something that you fill out, you do the pages, however many pages it might be, send it off, and then wish good luck to get it. But with a corporation, sometimes we treat them the same way, as opposed to what you just said, which was find out what's important to that corporation.
Right.
how can they best share their message, and does your organization, does your nonprofit fit with that to be synchronistic?
Right. I mean, it's really a strategy. I mean, you have to think about, from a relationship standpoint, who are the people that you surround yourself with? Who are the people that are your closest friends? They have similarities. It's the same thing when you're looking at relationships from a nonprofit perspective. Those corporations, individuals, people that make up that mix for your fundraising dollars all have something in common. They love what you do. If you're talking to people or companies that really don't have, any push or passion for what it is that you're providing in the community, they're not the right people to be asking. Go ask someone else who actually loves that part.
And that's the question that helps you define
who you're spending your time with.
Where's my energy going?
Right.
What do I focus on?
Right. And you can't, it's not that it's not worth working with people that don't necessarily completely fit the mold, because it takes time to develop relationships, but your energy is better spent on people that already have some want to help what it is that you're providing to the community and helping people or animals or whatever it might be, than focusing on people that probably won't. And from the corporation's perspective, every time you go online and do an application and send it in, there is actually a person that has to review it and do something. So there is a human connection opportunity behind every corporate application. And there's people within your local community that represent that organization that may be willing to come out and do a volunteer day or some kind of way for you to connect with actual people versus doing the online piece of it. So it's very complicated, but if you just go back to the relationship element of it and finding someone to connect with and growing that piece, that's where it all starts.
So I want to summarize this because we want to get into truth or care as well. But the question, number one, what are your budgetary needs?
You need to know what your needs are.
You need to know what your needs are.
Right.
And what can be met within those needs with in-kind versus
Financial
actual funds.
contribution.
Yes. And then within those, what are some applicable grants? Yes, but then also where are some relationships that you can really build? And when you have an annual event, follow up.
Right.
Follow
And
up.
thank.
And thank.
You can't thank people
And get them
enough.
engaged. I like the part that you're talking about with volunteerism too, because sometimes in fundraising, it's like, well, that's volunteerism. That's not bringing any money. But
It can turn
lead
into
to
it.
that. Yeah.
And I've watched it happen, and it's pretty amazing if you keep people engaged with something they enjoy doing and finding an opportunity for them to give, how it turns into something greater.
Ah. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing this.
welcome.
We
Thank
could
you
probably
for
talk about
having me.
fundraising for, weeks.
A long time.
Yes, but we wouldn't quite cover that. So we like to end the show with one, our trait is truth or care, which is why you do what you do. So what is it about working with nonprofits now that you've made that transition from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world? What is it? Why do you do what you do? What does philanthropy mean to your heart?
Well, I think as a child, my parents were always really involved in giving back and helping other people. And I think as a child, I witnessed that, and I was the oldest of three. And so my sisters and I remember specifically one year during Christmas time, they told us that we were going to go deliver all of these gifts to a community of migrant families. And so we drove down, and we really understand exactly what it meant. But I think what has stayed with me in all of my time working in nonprofit is that moment where you are in front of somebody who really needs help. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a person. It could be a cause for something else. But you're in front of someone who really needs help, and you're able to deliver that and provide something that's life-changing for that person. And so in my heart, it's giving back to people who may need help more than me, as much as me, less. It really doesn't matter, but I think we're all here to help each other.
You're connecting.
And we have talents and skill sets that can benefit each other in a way that then end up helping others. And as a kid, delivering those gifts and seeing other kids,
Wow.
just elated with joy because they were given something that they didn't have or provided something that, they needed was just an amazing experience. And so that has stayed with me working with nonprofits. And my joy working in fundraising is being able to be part of that action piece that is truly raising funds or raising resources to help others.
That's cool.
So
You're making a difference where you go, and you've got the benefit of connecting from human to human.
Exactly.
Heart to heart.
Yep.
Awesome.
I love
Well,
that.
thank you for being a difference maker.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
No problem.
A joy
It was
to
wonderful.
have you. Thank
Thank you.
That wraps up another edition of The Philanthropy Show. Be sure to go to thephilanthropyshow.com and check out the past shows tab for even more goodness. See you next week.
Do you have an idea for The Philanthropy Show? Contact us via our website or email us at tps@myvideovoice.com.